Good morning, everybody. Thank you for that warm South Carolina welcome. Jim, I'm grateful to you for that very eloquent and moving eulogy you just provided me there. I'm so grateful to you, but it's a wonderful thing to call Jim Hodges not only my friend, but my partner. I remember it was when you were governor, you invited me down to give the JJ speech, which I enjoyed very, very much, and it's great to be with you here again this morning. It's so wonderful to see my friend Governor Riley as well, who I was thinking back when Bill Clinton was talking last night about growing up in rural Arkansas. And Governor, I know that he had role models and I had role models, but there was a day in the South in particular when it was not easy to be a Reformed Democrat, but you were. And for many of us, you were our role models, so for that I say thank you. And not only that, he then went on after the governorship to be a great Secretary of Education, and I'm sometimes asked, I love being in the United States Senate, but I really love being governor because I was there every day in my state getting things done. And Dick, I'm sometimes asked, of all the things I was privileged to do in the state of Indiana, if I had to pick one, what would I say I was proudest of? And there's something we enacted. We were even able to get the Republicans, we kind of pulled this one over on them, to go along with this. It's called the 21st Century Scholars. In my state today, any child growing up in the state of Indiana whose family qualifies for the free lunch program, and who in 7th grade signs a written pledge to graduate from high school with a B average and to not get involved with drugs or alcohol, every one of those kids, they qualify for a full college scholarship to the public university of their choice in the state of Indiana. We have opened up the doors of college opportunity to hundreds of thousands of children in our state who are committed to doing right, to working hard, opening up opportunity for them. Our state is better off, they're better off. It's because of governors like Governor Riley who inspired us to do that sort of thing, that they have that opportunity. So Governor, we're very grateful to you, again, for your legacy. And for getting up early in the morning to listen to me. Is Dick Harpootlian still here, or did he go out to get a cup of coffee? Dick has the best sense of humor, I think, in politics today. It shows that politics can not only be serious but enjoyable, but it also puts me in a tough spot, Governor O'Malley in a tough spot, because it reminds me of something my father once said. My dad was in the Senate for 18 years. There's an old saying in the circus, I don't know if any of you have heard this saying, the toughest act to follow in the circus is the wild animal act. So we follow Dick Harpootlian, there we are, we're in a tough spot. But I appreciate him because of his service to South Carolina and the Democratic Party, and for maintaining a sense of humor, which makes it all fun. I miss someone here today, and this is going to date me a little bit, but I always admired Fritz Hollins. Fritz Hollins was a good man. He was a great governor of your state. He was a great Democratic United States Senator. Fritz also had a sense of humor. So I'm elected to the Senate. I'm out there, literally one of my first days in the United States Senate. Fritz Hollins, who was a friend of my parents, and Pizzi, his wife, who was a friend of my mother's, Fritz came up to me in the floor of the Senate. He said, Evan, I have something to ask you. And I thought, he wants to consult with me about economic policy or education policy or healthcare policy. Isn't this a great thing? And I said, of course, Senator, what is it? He said, would you give me a ride home? Well, I said, sure. So I'm driving along, and at the end of the Senate work day, and I'm driving along, and so I figured I'd make small talk with this very distinguished and long-serving United States Senator. So I said, Fritz, I know you and Pete have been married a long time. He said, yes, that's right. And I said, what is the secret to your matrimonial success? This is a true story. And he said, why, Evan? He said, it's really very simple. My wife and I, we're in love with the same person. Me. So I've always loved Fritz, and I'm grateful to South Carolina for him to send him to the United States Senate. By the way, one last thing, and I see Dick was wandering around here. I want to thank the person who gave us the invocation this morning. In the United States Senate, we used to begin our deliberations every day with a prayer. And they'd invite different ministers from different from different denominations to give the invocation every day and open at the United States Senate. But we have a permanent chaplain who serves in the United States Senate, ministers to the senators and their families and the other people who work in the Senate. That's his congregation, that's his flock. And the minister, he was once asked, the pastor was once asked, he said, well, when you open up the Senate every day, and and you give the invocation and you pray. Do you pray for the senators? This is a true story also. The Senate chaplain thought for a moment, he said, no. He said, I look at the senators. I pray for the country. And with some of those Republicans out there, we better pray for the country. I'll tell you, we need it. So look, the last thing you all need, I did serve in the Senate for 12 years, but I tried to not filibuster. The last thing you need is another long speech. But let me say a couple of things that I do believe are important here today. Jim Hodges invited me to speak because I come from a state that is sometimes described, somewhat like South Carolina, as a more conservative, difficult, so-called red state. And that is true if you look at the election results. When I was elected governor, we hadn't elected a Democrat governor in 20 years. Today, as I address you, there's not a single member of our party elected to statewide office. Our state legislature, because of the blowout 2 years ago, we went from 52-48 in our House of Representatives, Democrat 52-48, we're now 60-40 Republican. And they just wrote the new maps that are going to be difficult for us. Our state Senate is now 37 Republican, 13 Democrat. Our poor state senators, they can't even walk out and break a quorum. You know, they can go to the restroom, but they can't break a quorum, which does make it difficult. But I'm here this morning to tell you that even from states like mine, and even from states like South Carolina, it is not impossible. We can get this job done. And you know we can do that with difficult numbers like Hodges and Riley and mayors like Mayor Riley and others. We hadn't voted Democrat for president in 50 years, not since LBJ, until 2008, when the state of Indiana voted for Barack Obama for president of the United States of America. And we were able to do that because we worked to forge a coalition of working men and women, of students, of people of color, of disillusioned Republicans who we reached out to who'd had enough of George Bush. I can't tell you how many times I had folks come up to me sort of in a confessional kind of way and said, well, Governor, you know, I'm a Republican, but I know this country needs a change. I know we can do better. And with that kind of attitude, we can carry South Carolina, we can carry Indiana, we can carry the United States of America. Now, I always thought the way to do that was to build bridges rather than break them down. And the most important thing I thought our friend President Clinton said last night was that this president inherited one heck of a mess. He said that the Republican case against President Obama really boils down to, well, we left him with a heck of a mess. He didn't clean it up fast enough, so fire him and put us back in, right? You know, that's basically their case. But I'm here this morning to tell you just a brief little story. I served on the Senate Banking Committee for all 12 years. So I got a call one night when the economy was just in free fall and things looked their worst. At about 10 o'clock. And the call was from my personal assistant. He said, the Secretary of the Treasury wants you to come down and meet with the Chairman of the Federal Reserve in the Capitol because there's one heck of a problem. So I said, okay, and about 10 of us gathered down there in the United States Senate. By then it was about 11 o'clock at night. There sat the Secretary of the Treasury, card-carrying Republican under President Bush. It was in October, I'll never forget it, and Ben Bernanke, the Chairman of the Federal Reserve. And Hank Paulson, who's a card-carrying Republican, was Secretary of the Treasury, turned to the Chairman of the Federal Reserve and said, Ben, tell the senators what the situation is. And Bernanke is a professor. He's an economics professor from Princeton, so he's not given to long speeches. By the way, Don Fowler, it's great to see you here today. Thank you for your service to our state, to our country. So the Chairman of the Federal Reserve looks at us 10 senators, Democrat and Republican. And this is what he said. He said the economy is in free fall. He said if nothing is done, we will lose millions of jobs, tens of thousands of businesses, and if we're not lucky, this downturn in its severity will rival the Great Depression in its magnitude. And this is a man who wrote a book about the Great Depression. That's what it was. So there was silence in the room. And the senators, we kind of looked at each other, and it was said, well, finally somebody piped up and said, well, we can't have that, so what are we going to do? The reason I tell you this story is, this was the greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression. And it was only because of the leadership of Barack Obama and the Democratic Party that we kept things from being as bad as the Great Depression. That is the truth. That is the mess that Republicans left us present. Now, is anybody going to clean that mess up in 4 short years? No. But as Bill Clinton said last night, so eloquently, and by the way, following Michelle Obama and Bill Clinton, I'm tempted to say the president just ought to tell us what he's going to do for the next 4 years, say amen, and adjourn the convention. I don't think you do better than that. But as President Clinton laid out last night, nobody was going to clean that entire mess up in just 4 short years. But would we go back to the way it was 4 years ago? No way. Losing hundreds of thousands of jobs every month? Instead, we've created 4.5 million new jobs under President Obama. We wouldn't go back to that. Let's talk about the fiscal mess. George W. Bush inherited from Bill Clinton and the Democratic Party the largest budget surplus in the history of America. Budget's balanced, we're running a surplus, and in 8 short years, what do? Turn the largest surplus in the history of the country to the largest deficit in the history of the country. Would we go back to that kind of leadership? I don't think so. So the reason I tell this story is to say that in states like South Carolina and states like Indiana, we as Democrats can stand up and tell an economic story of verging on the next Great Depression, and instead of pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, saving the auto industry, beginning to create jobs once again, getting businesses back on their feet, and reaching out to independents and sensible Republicans and say, do you really want to go back to that kind of path, or aren't we on a better journey to a better America? We can sell this story in South Carolina and Indiana out there to independents and in red states of America. Balancing the budget, creating surpluses, not deficits, and doing it in the right kind of way that preserves Pell Grants and educational opportunities, that saves the safety net for senior citizens. One of the things I think was important for Bill Clinton to say last night, that Dick Riley would know and I would know as former governors and Jim Hodges, the largest expenditure in Medicaid that the Republicans want to cap and reduce by 25% or more, 33% I guess. The largest expenditure by far, nursing homes for senior citizens. Now, we really want to balance the budgets on the back of poor children and poor senior citizens? I don't think so. That's not the Democratic way. That's not the American way. And even in South Carolina and Indiana, we know that we can do better than that. So the final couple of things I'd say, in states like ours, we create jobs as Democrats. We grow businesses because we know, as FDR once said, the very best social program known to man is a good job. We know that balancing the budget and being fiscally responsible is important because if you're going broke, the first folks who get hurt are those who are less fortunate. And count on the rest of us for a helping hand so that they can go on and lead a better life, and in so doing enrich all of us. And we love our country. I think it's important. You know, my state is the headquarters of the American Legion. And as Democrats, we don't take a back seat to anyone when it comes to our patriotism. I had a chance to, back when I was off my medication a few years ago, I was thinking about running for president. I took my family on a little vacation because I thought I might not. I've got twin boys who are now, yesterday was their first day as juniors in high school. It's hard for me to believe it, and I'm a little worried because they have their learner's permits to drive. I'm kind of wondering about all this. But in any event, when I thought I might not see them for a few years, because of politics, we took a little family vacation, and one of the places we stopped was Normandy. And we visited, just at sunset, the cemetery that is there, where there are more than 10,000 young American men buried. And there are crosses and there are stars of David, row after row after row. And I walked with my two boys until we found one. It has their date of birth, and the date they passed, and the state that they're from. And we walked until we found one of those crosses with a young boy from my state. And he was only 19 years old when he gave his life for our country. And the point that I want to make is that on those crosses and on those stars of David, it didn't say whether they were Democrats or Republicans. It doesn't say whether they're liberals or conservatives. It only says that they were Americans who gave their lives for that was the price for the freedom that we cherish here today. And this is the final thing I'm going to say. One of the things I so deeply resent about the far right in America today is that they seek to divide us as a country. They're trying to convince Americans that in fact we have more that makes us different than more that makes us common. And in fact we have so much more in common as Americans than we do that divides us. The truth of the matter is that although you come from South Carolina and I come from Indiana, this country is really not divided into red states and blue states. We are, as those crosses in Normandy indicate, 50 red, white, and blue states with a common cause, a common goal. And if we're going to meet the challenges that face this great country, it's time we started thinking like that once again. And that is the vision of Barack Obama. And that is the message of Bill Clinton and Michelle Obama the other night. That we really are Americans first, and partisans and ideologues second, third, or fourth. So in the words of a great civil rights leader who I had the privilege to see speak once, he looked out at the audience and he said, "I've never forgotten this." He said, "You know, we may have arrived on these shores in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now."
Amen.
Isn't that true? Isn't that true? And it's about time we started thinking and acting that way, and lifted our fellow citizens up, and in so doing, fashioning a future of which we can be proud, and an inheritance for my children and your children and our grandchildren that will be a better America, more decent, more compassionate, and more just. We can do this with the leadership of Barack Obama. We can do this in your state of mind with the leadership of the Hodges and the Rileys and the other fine public servants you have in your state. And in so doing, fulfill the great destiny of this nation, which is said in our pledge. One nation under God, with liberty and justice, not just for the few, and not just for the fortunate, but for each and every one. Thank you for having me this morning. God bless.